Hi everybody, it's Cynthia Kane again, and welcome back to UL100ZB for the week of April 15th, in which we're going to be covering some issues dealing with copyright and the ethical use of information. We're going to start first of all with copyright basics. Now we have touched on this just a bit in some of our previous modules when we've emphasized and we've mentioned to you that whenever you write anything, whenever you create anything, whether that's a paper or a project or other form of information creation, that you indeed already own your own copyright to your work, and also the fact that nobody else can use your original work without your permission. I've given you a link here to the Copyright Clearance Center at www.copyright.com. The reason is that the Copyright Clearance Center actually has a very good definition of what copyright and ethical use of information really is. It states that in general, copyright is a form of legal protection given to content creators through the assignment of specific rights to works that qualify for protection. It also goes over the main goals of copyright to encourage the development of culture, science, and innovation, facilitating access to knowledge and entertainment for the public. So you know that we've mentioned in several videos already that copyright can be a commodity and that information indeed can be a commodity. This really boils down to the fact that copyright is basically economic as well as protecting the author's work. That's why sometimes information can actually cost quite a bit of money, such as textbooks, if you have to buy textbooks for other courses, and even if you're buying an e-book to read on your Kindle or tablet or other device. Basically, you're paying the author for that creation of that work, and that's really what a lot of copyright is all about. Again, what that means is that any work that you create already has a copyright. It's copyrighted to you. So that someone else quotes from your work, that individual has to give you credit. And the same goes for you. You have to give an individual credit for his or her own work. Now, you might be wondering, and you're probably also pretty happy about the fact, that you didn't have to pay for our textbook, the Information Literacy User's Guide. It's available freely online as a PDF. Our textbook is an example of something that you may have already heard of, and if you haven't, you'll start hearing about this a little bit more. It's a concept called open access, or Open Educational Resources, OER for short. Wikipedia defines open access as free, unrestricted access to peer-reviewed scholarly research. This, I can tell you, is a big debate right now in the field of education. I would say both K through 12 and also higher education. You might not realize this, but if I publish an article in a peer-reviewed scholarly journal, I don't necessarily have free access to that. Sometimes what I have to do is sign a contract saying that I am giving the publisher of that scholarly journal the rights to reproduce that in other forms, print and online. And it also means that I might or might not be freely available as the author to give out copies of the article that I actually wrote. It all depends, again, upon the contract that I signed with that publisher. We're going to be taking a look in just a second at some of these particular definitions, and we're also going to look now at something that is freely available to you called the Directory of Open Access Journals. So here's the definition of open access according to Wikipedia that I borrowed, and we just mentioned print-based academic journals as well as freely available materials. I want you to take a look over here to the right side of the screen at this little thing, this little icon that looks like it's a lock that's unlocked. This is a logo for open access. We're going to come back to this in just a second because I have an example of something that I want to show you that you may find more and more often in library databases that the library has actually paid for. Here's the link to the textbook that we're having you use for UL100, the Information Literacy User's Guide, an open online textbook. And you've already had a chance to see that you can download this as a PDF. You're not having to pay for it. We actually chose this textbook on purpose for UL100. One reason that we chose it was that we liked it. We liked what it had to say about the pillars of information literacy, and we thought that that would be very useful for our course. And we've actually used this for quite a few years now. But another thing that we did keep in mind is that we didn't necessarily find any other textbooks that you would have had to pay for that had the quality of information that we felt that this particular textbook covered. You may find this more and more often in your classes. You may still be paying for textbooks, but again, I think there's a little bit more of a push in higher education now for professors and other faculty to seek examples of OER, open educational resources, that they can provide access to the students that still have that quality information that they want you to have as taking classes at Emporia State University. I'm going to scroll down here for just a second. Your textbook actually comes from the State University of New York system, or SUNY for short. And as we see here, Open SUNY textbooks, SUNY has actually published a number of open access textbooks in addition to the one that we are using. And as you can see, there are quite a few here that are covering a wide range of topics. There's ours, but there are some others that deal with physics, with math, nursing care, writing in college. And again, I think this is going to become more and more the trend as we start thinking about information as a commodity and how much sometimes that we are expecting people actually to pay for information. I also wanted to go back to the directory of open access journals. Now, if you were to go to the letter D on our databases page, the A to Z page, you would actually find the directory of open access journals there because we have provided that as a link. But we also have a link here that I've given you, doha.org. And let's go back to this. What I've done here on the directory of open access journals is showed you that you can actually browse by subject. This is a huge, huge list of journals. And basically what it means that these journals have free open access to their articles online, usually in PDF. I browsed in the social sciences area because I wanted to narrow this down a little bit more. And you can also say that you only want journals that are in the English language or in other languages. And you may also want only peer-reviewed or a little bit more scholarly journals. And I did this. Now you can see that a lot of these are still pretty broad to begin with. So browsing in DOHA is not always that successful. I think that using the directory of open access journals works a little bit better if you're looking for a specific journal title and you want to see if that specific journal is available as open access. You can get to it freely without any restrictions. I wanted to show you something else, though, that I think you're going to find more and more often. I certainly have found this as I keep doing research in different areas. So I've gone back to our A to Z databases list on our library's webpage. You will recall that we really want you to explore library databases and see what you can find in terms of articles. I went to a database called PsycInfo that the library pays for. And on this next tab, you can see that I did a search on eating disorders or anorexia or bulimia or disordered eating, and I wanted to see what the effects of social media might be on those types of eating disorders. I limited my search to the abstract, which I've showed you how to do before because I want those keywords to appear only in the abstracts of articles. And as you can see, I wound up with 130 references. But the one I want to focus on is actually down here, record number 5. This is an article titled, Instagram Use is Linked to Increased Symptoms of Orthorexia Nervosa. That sounds like that might be a rather interesting article. Now, at first glance, it does not look as if this article is going to be available in PDF full text through the PsycInfo database, because you will notice that I don't have a link here for a PDF. But remember just a few seconds ago when I showed you that logo for open access? This tells me that this journal, Eating and Weight Disorders, is actually an open access journal. So if I click on this link, and if I scroll down to the bottom of the screen, I'm going to have something that's called a DOI. This is something that I do want you all to be familiar with when you start thinking about information access, which is another part of information literacy. DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier. This is actually a permanent link that does not appear in every single article and every single database, but it does appear in some databases for some articles. In this particular instance, this DOI means that if I click on this permanent link, that led me to this journal, Eating and Weight Disorders, as an open access journal. And if I were to click on download PDF over here, I could freely download the PDF of that article. I'm not having to pay for it. I'm not having to be logged in or authenticated as an Emporia State University student. So again, I really think that we're going to see these types of links in databases more and more often to open access journals, because they are becoming recognized, I think, increasingly as valid, peer-reviewed scholarly journals, every bit as valid as journals that a library might pay hundreds or thousands of dollars for. Now, one of the learning assessments that you can do for this week is analyzing a scenario called ethical use of information. We will be going over that in the video tutorial in which we go over the engagement activities and the learning assessments for this week. So something that I do want you to think about is, how easy is it to scan? How easy is it to get access to a scanner, scan just about anything in PDF, and then save it or send it, basically do whatever you need to do with it? Is that legal? Is that ethical? There is something that is called fair use, and fair use actually comes into play in terms of education. It is a legal doctrine. It actually permits the unlicensed use of copyright protected works in certain circumstances. There are 4 factors that have to apply for fair use: the purpose of the character, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount of the work used compared to the whole, and the effect of the use upon potential market or value of the work. So what does that mean for you as Emporia State University students? It means that most of the time, if you were to come into William Allen White Library and use one of our scanners to scan an article from a print copy of a magazine or a journal, or a book chapter from a textbook, you are probably going to be protected under the 4 factors of fair use, because you are not actually scanning the entire book. That's the amount of the work used compared to the whole. You're not going to turn around and resell the PDF to one of your classmates. At least we hope that you don't do that. And so that would have to do with the effect of the use upon potential market or value of the work. The purpose and the character. Well, more than likely, you're going to be scanning an article or maybe scanning a book chapter because you would like to look at it later on. You might want to print it out for your own purposes, or you might not have ready access to that complete book or that complete magazine or journal. You just need a part of it. So that could be the purpose or the character. Think about this because, again, this is going to come into play, and we're going to ask you to consider these 4 factors of fair use in our learning assessment, which has to do with ethical use of information. And again, we'll be covering this in our next video tutorial. So I know that you've had this happen. I've had this happen I don't know how many times. I can be listening to a song and I think, my gosh, that song sounds so familiar. That tune sounds terribly familiar. Well, this has happened over the years. It's probably as old as music itself, as old as the creation of music itself. Fair use or plagiarism. I actually have some videos that I'm going to show you in just a second. I'm actually going to show you how you can get access to those. And what I want you to do is listen to these videos on your own, because these are actually some pretty famous cases on the use of actual tunes in more than one context. And the question is it fair use, or were those tunes actually plagiarized? And when we go back over here to our unit that we're in right now, week 5, this is the link that I want you to go to. So on this page, I want you to listen to Anna Kendrick, Cups. This is going to sound pretty familiar because this is from the movie Pitch Perfect. And then I want you to compare that tune, basically compare both the words, the lyrics, and then also the tune itself to this video by the Carter family, which was recorded back in the 1920s. And it's a song called Will You Miss Me When I'm Gone? And I want you to listen to some of the similarities in that. I also then want you to listen to this song by the Chiffons, He's So Fine. And then I want you to compare that tune to a song that George Harrison of the Beatles wrote and performed in the early 1970s when he went solo. And this is a song called My Sweet Lord. So compare these two and then compare these two. And the reason I want you to do that is that they both actually feature some very interesting similarities. One similarity is probably okay. The other similarity may not be as okay as we think. In fact, when it came to comparing the Chiffons, He's So Fine, to George Harrison's My Sweet Lord, George Harrison was actually sued for plagiarizing the tune of He's So Fine. And that particular lawsuit dragged on for years and years. George Harrison actually then was found that he might have committed unintentional plagiarism. He didn't really mean to copy the tune, but he actually did nevertheless. And he had to pay some royalties to the publisher, the publishing company of He's So Fine. In the case of Anna Kendrick, Cups, and the Carter family, Will You Miss Me When I'm Gone? This is an interesting article that I found that talks about a comprehensive history of the cups phenomenon. And essentially, this article talks about the fact that the tune, Will You Miss Me When I'm Gone, evolved quite a bit over the years. It evolved into a video using cups. It's kind of a fun thing that actually popped up in an episode of Full House. And then became pretty famous in the movie Pitch Perfect. Now, in this particular case, was this plagiarism, or was this the natural evolution of a song? This is something we have to keep in mind when we're talking about plagiarism and fair use. So I hope you enjoy listening to these videos and just sort of think about what the implications are when you are creating something. When you're creating something original, it may not be that original, but we also may not have intended to plagiarize. And again, this really pops up when it comes to music. So copyright questions also can occur in the use of music when it comes to original versus replacement music. Now, this may have happened to you when you're watching a streaming video on Netflix. Many films and many TV shows use music deliberately to evoke an emotional response from the audience. But often with commercial releases, DVDs, and streaming video, the original music by the original artist in a movie or in an episode of a TV show is actually stripped out. Generic music may be put in as a replacement, or in some cases, the scenes with the original music are cut completely. Now, why does this happen? Because most often the rights to pay the bands or the artists for use of the songs in commercial releases are far too expensive to negotiate. In other words, they haven't really thought about that. A good example is that Saturday Night Live, a lot of you may watch this. There's a lot of bands, there are a lot of artists that perform every week on Saturday Night Live. If you watch some streaming videos of older Saturday Night Live episodes, those episodes may or may not include the original performances that were on the original showings, the original airings of those episodes. And that can also be because the band or the artist did not give their permission to use those performances in a re-release on streaming video. So sometimes that's why we think something might be missing. And again, sometimes music can be changed and we think, that's not quite the right music that I remember when I was watching that show or I was watching that movie originally. It does come down to copyright and, again, economic use of information. So an engagement activity that we had for you for this week has to do with copyright. We're going to ask you to consider this question. Should the original music for a film or a television show be the primary focus of a commercial release on DVD or streaming video? Or is it more important to release the film or the TV series without the original music to get it to the audience as soon as possible? I have another example I'm going to show you in just a second that I want you to listen to for this week. I was a huge fan back in the 1990s of the original Beverly Hills 90210. And if you ever watch any of this show, or if you're at all familiar with it, this was a classic case of a show using a lot of original music from the 1990s to evoke an emotional response from their audiences. In fact, a lot of bands and a lot of artists kind of got their break on 90210 because their music was actually reaching a larger audience for the first time. REM is a good example. So with reruns on television, sometimes they will still use the original music. The DVDs for Beverly Hills 90210 were first released probably about 10 to 15 years ago when DVDs were still very much the medium. And there was a lot of disappointment from fans of the original show because the DVDs, for the most part, replaced the original songs from different scenes of the show with generic music. And a lot of the fans of the show were very unhappy because they said, well, that just changed everything. It changed the emotion. It actually changed the nature of the episode itself. Again, copyright. Music rights for television shows and films may not always include the rights for re-releases on DVD or streaming video, and negotiating those rights with the musicians may involve millions of dollars because they're going to make a lot of money. And then that can also make a price of a DVD much more expensive. It can also greatly delay the release of a show or a film on streaming video. So we're going to go back to our Canvas course in just a second. And I've given you on our Canvas course a very famous clip, a very famous scene from Beverly Hills 90210 involving the characters Dylan and Brenda. And this is when Brenda has had a pregnancy scare and they are deciding whether they're going to break up or stay together. And this clip that I want you to watch will be under this link here, Beverly Hills 90210 original music and replacement music. So again, I want you to listen to this on your own. This first one has the original music underlying the scene. It's actually a song by the band REM, Losing My Religion, which you may be familiar with. The second clip, very same scene, but in this case, the song Losing My Religion is replaced by generic music. I do not want to make you think one way or the other. I just want you to play both of these clips for yourselves during this module, during this week. And I want you to think about this because this is going to have to do with your engagement activity. Does it make a difference if this one uses the original music and this one uses the generic music? Does it not make a difference? I do want to give you a warning. When you click on the second clip for too much, You may get a warning that this video is inappropriate and you agree and you wish to proceed. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that because it's certainly not inappropriate, but you may get that warning, and it also may ask you to log into your Gmail account, basically your g.emporia.edu account. If you have any problems playing the clip, please email me and I'll be happy to help you work through that. But listen to both, judge for yourself. When you finish this, you'll be ready then for our next video tutorial for this week's engagement activities and learning assessments. We have a checkpoint 2 for quiz number 2, which is going to quiz you on everything that we've done so far. We have 2 engagement activities, and then we have 2 learning assessments that you may choose to complete for this week. Take care.